Hello, hello folks, we're in the garden again today. Well, garden, it's going to be greenhouse, because today we're going to talk about all the things you should think about before you buy a greenhouse. 2 seconds, that's the postie. Delivery from Rhino Greenhouses. It's clearly not a greenhouse, but yeah, we'll get to this later on. So actually, okay, so before you buy a greenhouse then, you guys have been in touch loads in all the comments of all the greenhouse videos, asking questions about my greenhouse, all the different greenhouses I've had, and just little bits and bobs because you're telling me that you're all buying greenhouses. So I thought that's a perfect opportunity to chat about it, because this beauty olive is actually my third greenhouse. I had a polythene kind of plastic covered frame greenhouse thing way back before I even had a garden. Then before I had this one in this very spot, I had a polycarbonate greenhouse. It was an aluminium frame and polycarbonate glazing. And now I've got this awesome, super strong Rhino greenhouse that's glass glazing. So I thought it'd be a perfect chance to chat about the things you should think about before you buy a greenhouse. So we're going to start on the outdoors then. Number one then is location. Where are you going to put your greenhouse in your garden? Because it's quite important, okay? So what you want then is, location-wise, south is always best. The same as a south-facing garden's always best. That way you'll get the maximum amount of sunlight and daily light into your greenhouse for that direct light. Okay, if for some reason you can't have south, southeast is also good, and that's what I've got. I've got a kind of southeast-ish direction here with my garden, and what happens with me is I've got the sun rises over there and goes that way, so pretty much for the whole day my greenhouse is getting sunlight. Okay, for me that is awesome. I don't live in a country where it's so crazy hot that that amount of light is bad for my plants, but also it's not super hot, so I don't have to worry about too much of that heat being generated either. But we'll go into that in a bit, okay? The other thing with location you want to think about is things like trees, fences, any of these types of things that can actually create a shade or a shadow in your greenhouse, because obviously bad side will reduce the amount of light getting in, but you may actually want that as well. If you live in some of these really hot, sunny climates, you might want an opportunity to have that little bit of shade at certain points in the day, maybe midday when the sun's strongest. Okay, so have a think about that. Are there things that are going to cause shadow on your greenhouse, or is it going to get direct light all of the time? And is it in a spot in your garden that gets lots and lots of sunlight? So that's location. What's next? Well, something this simple. That's as close as you're ever getting to me pole dancing. Gutters. Gutters are awesome on a greenhouse because the rain hits the roof and the roof is sort of slanted, so it runs off. But it then comes down here and it hits the ground right at the base of the greenhouse, and it could then be going into your greenhouse and creating wet, nasty, icky bits you don't want. Because you want, the whole point of greenhouse is controlled environment. So gutters are awesome because they just take that away a bit, and you can then decide where that water runs off into with your downpipe. You can see here, I've got the downpipe. I could, if I wanted to, add a water butt, and then all the rain would come off the gutters into a water butt, which is really handy if you live in a country where you might get hosepipe bans, have droughts, that type of thing. You might want to collect as much rainwater as you can for water in the garden. Luckily in Scotland, water is not a problem here. You've seen how much it rains, so I don't do the whole water butt thing. But it's an option if you're having a greenhouse. You might want to think about that. Now the other thing is the glazing, okay? Now, you guys know I'm now on a glass greenhouse, okay? I haven't always been, like I said, I've had plastic, polycarbonate and now glass. I have done a video all about the differences and the pluses and minuses between polycarbonate and glass, so I'm not going to go into loads and loads of detail on that just now. If you want to see that video, then it's here. Feel free to open it in a new tab and you can go and watch it after this one and get all the info. But very, very basically, I've chosen to move to glass because it is much, much stronger. It's much more durable. I've got super, super tough. It's horticultural glass, but it's super, super tough in this greenhouse. So it should stand up to the fact that I've got a kids' play park there and the occasional thing might come over the fence and hit it, hopefully. But also the polycarbonate panels are much, much cheaper to replace, but they don't cope as well with the wind. And that's the thing, you need to know the weather in your area. I am very windy here, very, very windy. So the polycarbonate greenhouse just didn't stand up to it. And it was constantly having panels blown out that I was then having to go back and tape into place. So I've switched to glass. So on that topic of the weather, there is another thing that's kind of important, and that is how strong and stable and sturdy your greenhouse is. So we're in the greenhouse. I almost missed there because I'm too short. I hope you guys could hear that because this greenhouse is incredibly strong. It is an aluminium frame like most of the greenhouses are, but it is really, really rigid. It has lots of these crossbars holding things in place and it's quite heavy. And that for me was a big thing because the winds here are so strong. Other greenhouses just didn't cope with the winds. So that was a factor for me to think about. How strong and sturdy is it? Is it going to last? Those types of things, okay? And since we're in here, we will talk about inside your greenhouse now. So kind of things you need to think about on the inside. We know the whole point of your greenhouse is because you want to have that controlled climate, okay? You want to take sunny days and make the most of them by holding all the heat inside, but you also want to control it in a way that you don't want it getting too hot so that it actually can damage the plants. Because that's the thing, sometimes your greenhouse, if it's a good greenhouse, is going to get so incredibly hot that actually your plants will not be happy. So you want to be able to control that. And the way I can do that here, and what you should look for in a good greenhouse, is it should at least have windows in the roof, okay? Because heat can rise, that way the heat can go out and it keeps that going. It won't get cold because you've still got the sun coming in, but it just won't overheat. You won't end up with an oven, okay? Now, I also have vents in the sides of the greenhouse, and that just lets me get a little bit of airflow, which is quite important because it's great having it all being warm, but you don't want that warm, humid air because then you can encourage fungus, disease, all that kind of stuff. You want to be able to get airflow. It's good for your plants. So vents on the side of the greenhouse are an awesome idea, and they're dead easy. They just work like this. These are the vents. I've got one on either side of the greenhouse with a wee handle that lets me open them and close them as suits. Now, the thing about that is, at 10:30 at night, I'm comfy on the couch in my jammies. And trust me, the last thing I want to do is get off of the couch and come out here and close those vents. Or the same as if your roof vents are open on the top. You don't want to come out and close them. Same again, if you're not around. So people in Scotland will totally get me on this one. I could go to work and it could be a beautiful sunny morning, so I open all the vents because I don't want the greenhouse to overheat. I look out the window at lunchtime and there's snow. Oh God, quick, close up all the greenhouse vents. I can't, I'm at work. Or maybe I'm out doing something or whatever. So that leads me on to another feature. Now, some greenhouses come with this, some don't, but this is what my awesome delivery was today from Rhino. I have automated vent openers in both my roof windows. That means that they will open and close automatically depending on the temperature, which is really, really handy. But as you saw, my side vents don't, they're manual. So my little parcel is an automated vent opener that I'm going to fit now, which means if it's warm, my vent will open. When it cools down, that vent will automatically close. I'm so lazy, I will admit it, but it just adds that extra element of security for me. So, windows, airflow, vents, really, really important in your greenhouse. So we've done the location, we've looked at the glazing, We've looked at things like gutters. We've talked about having a really strong, sturdy frame. We've talked about airflow and windows and vents. The last thing, how usable is it? Oh, I need a wee bit of tea, hang on. Earl Grey. Usable, right. Because let's be honest, there's no point in having a greenhouse if you can't grow the stuff you want. That's why you have it. Now, this is where we talk about the size of your greenhouse and what's in it. And this is probably one of the most common questions I get. How big is your greenhouse? Okay, this greenhouse is only 8 foot by 6 foot. So it is 6 foot that wide, 8 foot long that way, okay? These standard greenhouse sizes, probably the most common size in your average garden. It's an awesome size because it's about your average shed size and it fits nicely in the garden, okay? I will say though, from experience, you will buy your greenhouse and you will always, no matter what size you buy, you will always wish you had gone bigger. Because once you have a greenhouse, you start to learn what you can do in it and then you want to grow more and you don't have the space. And so always go bigger than you think you're going to need, okay? And in order to deal with things the best you can, again, I've already done a video talking about this, but it is my setup and my staging. So I'm not going to go into it in detail here, but again, video is there, okay? Go and have a watch after you've finished here and you'll get a better idea about this. But what I do is I try and have a setup in here that's changeable so that I can use it for as much or as many different means as possible. So I grow tomato plants, so obviously they need to be down at floor level because they get very tall, okay? This greenhouse is quite a tall greenhouse, which is awesome for my tomato plants. My polycarbonate was quite short and the tomato plants used to hit the roof and then grow and come back in, and it was quite difficult. And again, there was a whole thing I did where I made a false base and raised 2 sleeper heights to make the greenhouse taller, which was a pain. And we'll go into that in a second. But the other thing here is you can see I've got this sort of waist high staging, but it's the same staging as is on this side. This stuff folds flat. So I can have 2 lots of waist height staging for when I'm planting up in spring and it's small plants like this. And I can drop them to the floor if I want to grow plants that need floor to ceiling height. At the back, I've got a really strong, sturdy, permanent staging there, permanent bench. And I use that for things like this big, heavy Quad Grow Plus, that kind of thing, because I don't need that full length. This just gives me a bit of changeability so that my greenhouse can suit all of my needs. Because otherwise, I wouldn't be able to do everything that I do in here, or I could, but it would be a real pain. Okay? So when you're thinking of your size, think about what you're going to be doing with the greenhouse and the type of things you need in it, and then think, will they fit? Because if I have a bench here, I want something that I can just reach over so I can get both sides of. But I want a space in the centre so that I can get to the different bits of the greenhouse. Okay, so things like that to think about. So talking about the inside and what we do with it, the last thing I want to talk about then is the ground. Okay, and I'm including the base of the greenhouse into this, even though technically it's about the build, but forgive me guys. Okay, the ground. Now, traditionally, a lot of folk actually plant into the earth in their greenhouses, which is awesome and works brilliantly, okay? I use a pot system, that's just me, but this centerpiece here, no matter how you actually plant, whether you plant into the soil, you use pots, regardless of what's going on, this center bit here can be quite important, because not only is it the bit that you walk back and forward on and get to things on, like little bit here that I've obviously missed and I need to prune, but enough said. But also this bit, I've got paving slabs in here because the sun comes in and these hold the heat. So when the sun goes down at night, these are still giving off a little bit of that heat that they've stored up from during the day. Now, you could obviously have a concrete base and do it that way, but the downside of concrete is it doesn't let water through, so you could end up with a wet greenhouse, flooding when you're watering, it doesn't drain, okay? So these are things to think about. You could use what you've heard me call chuckies. In Scotland, chuckies we call, it's like big gravel, big stones, you could have that and that would drain brilliantly. But the paving slabs I've chosen because they let me do that little trick with the heat from the sun. Because hey, it's Scotland. We have to store up all the heat we can. You guys have seen what it's like. In fact, I had a comment this morning asking why I don't have a transparent roof on the greenhouse. And I had to explain that actually I do. That was snow that day. You know who you are. Hiya! So there you go. So the last thing then, we talked about the floor, but I said I wanted to talk about the base because the best thing about this greenhouse is it's a flat door on the base. And by that, I mean, yes, there is a base, there is a strong, sturdy floor sort of frame construction this greenhouse goes into, which then anchors into the ground to hold it all rigid. My last greenhouse had a 4-inch sort of step right around it. I had to step over to get into the greenhouse. The amount of times I tripped on that, I cannot tell you. So this one doesn't have that. This one is actually flat on the floor, which if, I don't know, maybe you use a wheelchair, for instance, this would make it really easy for you to get in and work in your greenhouse. So that's things you want to think about. I'm perfectly healthy and well just now that I can step over into the greenhouse if needed. And it's annoying that I was tripping on it. But there may be a reason one day where I can't do that. I mean, I've spent time in crutches and all that kind of thing. So I know how awkward it can be. So think about these things. Long term, this is awesome for me. If I ever struggle, it's going to be much easier to get in and out. Things to think about. So there we go, guys. That is one of Eli's very quick twirls around the subject of the things you should think about before you buy your greenhouse, because they're not cheap. And let's face it, once you've bought it, you're stuck with it. Okay? Now, I know that I've done loads and loads on this topic before, so you guys might actually fancy popping along and checking out this. This is all my greenhouse videos, not about being in the greenhouse and growing. There's a whole nother playlist for that. This one is all about how I set my greenhouse up and all the good bits and bad bits and choices I made. So, choice for you guys. As always, it's been awesome having you guys, and I look forward to seeing you next week. See you guys.